Marcus Johnson walked through the busy spaceport with his small travel bag slung over his shoulder. The massive terminal buzzed with activity as hundreds of different alien species moved between the gates. Some had scales that shimmered like jewels. Others had multiple arms or eyes that glowed in the dim light. After 20 years of military service on Earth, Marcus had seen his share of strange things, but nothing quite like this. He was heading to Gate 73, where the luxury starship Celestial Dawn waited to take him to Kepler Station. At 42 years old, Marcus carried himself with the quiet confidence that came from surviving countless dangerous missions. His dark skin bore a few scars from his time in Delta Force, though most people would never notice them. He wore simple civilian clothes, dark jeans and a plain blue shirt, trying to blend in with the other passengers. The Federation had strict rules about military personnel traveling in uniform unless on official business, and this trip was supposed to be low-key. The boarding area for the Celestial Dawn impressed Marcus with its size and luxury. The ship stretched nearly a kilometer in length, with gleaming silver hull plating and elegant curves that spoke of advanced engineering. Wealthy passengers from across the galaxy chose this vessel for comfort and prestige. Marcus checked his boarding pass one more time and joined the line of passengers waiting to board. A tall alien with purple scales and 4 arms checked documents at the boarding gate. This was Zextar, the ship's head of security, though Marcus did not know his name yet. The alien's yellow eyes moved constantly, scanning each passenger with the practiced gaze of someone trained to spot trouble. When Marcus approached the checkpoint, those yellow eyes lingered on him longer than they had on the others. Zextar examined Marcus's identification papers with extra care. The human's documents showed he was traveling to Kepler Station for business meetings. Nothing unusual there. But something about the way this passenger moved caught the security chief's attention. The human's eyes swept the boarding area in a pattern that seemed too systematic, too aware. His posture suggested someone ready to move quickly if needed. These were behaviors Zextar associated with criminals or terrorists. Marcus noticed the extra scrutiny but said nothing. He had learned long ago that drawing attention to suspicious behavior only made things worse. He accepted his documents back with a polite nod and moved toward the ship's entrance. Behind him, Zextar made a note in his security pad about the human in seat 47B. The interior of the Celestial Dawn exceeded even Marcus's expectations. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and the walls displayed artwork from dozens of different worlds. Passengers relaxed in comfortable lounges, while robotic servants offered drinks and refreshments. Marcus found his cabin on Deck 7 and was surprised by its size and luxury. The bed was large enough for 3 people, and a viewing window showed the stars outside. As Marcus unpacked his few belongings, he automatically noted the room's layout and exits. This was pure habit from his military training, not paranoia. He located the emergency procedures manual and memorized the ship's basic layout. In his experience, knowing your environment could mean the difference between life and death, even on a peaceful luxury cruise. The ship's captain, Crystal Thane, was a member of the Shardai species. His body appeared to be made of living crystal that changed colors based on his emotions. Currently, those crystals glowed a pleased blue as he reviewed the passenger manifest in his private quarters. The Celestial Dawn carried some of the galaxy's wealthiest and most influential beings, and a successful trip would enhance his reputation considerably. Dr. Helen Carter, a human xenobiologist, had boarded the ship an hour before Marcus. She was traveling to Kepler Station to present her research on alien plant life to the Federation Science Council. Helen had noticed the suspicious looks some passengers gave to the few humans aboard, but she tried not to let it bother her. Humans were still considered newcomers to galactic society, and some prejudice was unfortunately normal. In the ship's security office, Zextar reviewed footage from the boarding process. He had flagged 3 passengers for additional monitoring, but the human in 47B concerned him most. The man's behavior patterns matched profiles of individuals trained in combat or espionage. Zextar decided to assign one of his officers to conduct discreet surveillance. Marcus made his way to the ship's main dining hall for dinner. The enormous, Room could seat nearly 1,000 passengers, with tables arranged around a central performance area. Tonight, entertainers from the water world of Aquatica performed graceful dances that seemed to defy gravity. Marcus chose a quiet table near the wall where he could observe the room while eating. The meal consisted of dishes from across the galaxy, prepared to accommodate different species' dietary needs. Marcus selected items that looked familiar and safe for human consumption. As he ate, he noticed other passengers pointing at him and whispering. Some of the looks were curious, others seemed less friendly. He had experienced racism before, both on Earth and in his dealings with aliens, so this did not surprise him. A small group of hive-more, insect-like beings with multiple eyes and clicking mandibles occupied the table next to Marcus. Their translator devices allowed him to understand their conversation, though he pretended not to listen. They discussed whether humans could be trusted in civilized society, given their species' violent history. One suggested that humans were still too primitive for true membership in the Federation. Marcus finished his meal and returned to his cabin. As he walked through the corridors, he noticed a young Vorthak officer following him at a distance. The alien tried to appear casual, but his surveillance techniques were obvious to someone with Marcus's training. Rather than confront the situation, Marcus simply noted the tale and continued to his room. Back in his cabin, Marcus prepared for sleep while considering the situation developing around him. He had hoped for a quiet, uneventful trip to his new assignment, but it appeared that would not be the case. The security team clearly suspected him of something, though he could not imagine what. His mission orders were completely legitimate, and his cover story would hold up under normal scrutiny. As the Celestial Dawn entered hyperspace and began its journey to Kepler Station, Marcus settled into bed and tried to get some rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he wanted to be ready for whatever developed. Outside his window, the stars stretched into lines of light as the ship traveled faster than the speed of light toward its destination, carrying its cargo of passengers and their hidden prejudices through the vast darkness of space. The next morning brought Marcus an unwelcome surprise when he tried to leave his cabin. A young Vorthak security officer waited in the corridor outside his door, making no attempt to hide his presence. The alien's purple scales gleamed under the ship's artificial lighting as he watched Marcus with obvious suspicion. Marcus nodded politely to the guard and headed toward the dining hall for breakfast, with his unwanted escort following several steps behind. In the security office, Zexitar reviewed overnight reports from his surveillance team. The human had done nothing suspicious during the night, but the security chief remained convinced that something was wrong. He had served on passenger ships for 15 years and prided himself on his ability to spot troublemakers before they caused problems. The human's calm reaction to being watched only confirmed Zexitar's suspicions that this passenger was hiding something dangerous. Marcus noticed the stares and whispers intensifying as he moved through the ship's common areas. Word had apparently spread among the passengers that security was watching him closely. Some aliens moved away when he approached, while others pointed and spoke in hushed tones to their companions. The discrimination was becoming more obvious and more uncomfortable. With each passing hour, Dr. Helen Carter observed the situation developing around Marcus from her table in the dining hall. She felt embarrassed by the treatment her fellow human was receiving, but she also felt powerless to intervene. Speaking up might only make things worse for both of them. Helen had worked hard to build her reputation in the scientific community, and she could not afford to be seen as a troublemaker who defended suspicious characters. Captain Crystalthane received his morning briefing from Zexitar in his luxurious quarters. The security chief presented his concerns about the human passenger, describing behavior patterns that suggested military or criminal training. The captain's crystalline form shifted to an orange color that indicated concern and uncertainty. He trusted his security chief's judgment, but he also knew that false accusations against passengers could damage his ship's reputation. Marcus attempted to visit the ship's observation deck after breakfast, but found his path blocked by two Vorthak security officers. They politely informed him that the deck was closed for maintenance, though he could see other passengers moving freely in that direction. The message was clear. His movements were being restricted without any official explanation or justification. The ship's main corridor buzzed with activity, as passengers moved between various recreational facilities. Marcus walked slowly toward the library, noting the locations of emergency exits and security stations out of pure habit. His military training had made such observations automatic, but he realized that this behavior was probably contributing to the suspicions about him. Group of wealthy Shardai passengers gathered near the central atrium to discuss the presence of the suspicious human aboard their ship. Their crystal bodies flickered with colors indicating disgust and concern as they debated whether Captain Crystal Thane should take stronger action. Some suggested that the human should be confined to his quarters until they reached Kepler Station, while others worried about the legal implications of such a decision. Dr. Carter approached Marcus in the library, where he sat reading a book about Federation history. She introduced herself and made polite conversation about their shared destination. Marcus appreciated the friendly contact with another human, but he remained cautious about revealing too much about himself or his mission. He could not tell if Dr. Carter was genuinely friendly or if she was gathering information for the security team. Zextar expanded his surveillance operation to include monitoring of Marcus's communications and a detailed search of his cabin. The search revealed nothing suspicious, just clothes, personal items, and some technical manuals related to Federation protocols. However, the security chief noted that the human had packed very efficiently, with everything organized in a way that suggested military training. The ship's social hierarchy became more apparent during the afternoon recreational activities. Passengers from senior species like the Shardai and the Kethamori occupied the best seats and received priority service from the staff. Humans and other junior species were quietly directed to less desirable areas. Marcus found himself increasingly isolated as other passengers avoided sitting near him. Marcus decided to test the limits of his restrictions by attempting to visit the ship's fitness center. The facility manager, a nervous Aquarian with blue skin and gills, informed him that all equipment was currently reserved for other passengers. When Marcus pointed out that the center appeared to be nearly empty, the manager became flustered and claimed that maintenance was scheduled for the equipment he wanted to use. The situation escalated when Marcus tried to access the ship's public computer terminals to send a message to his contacts on Kepler Station. A security officer immediately appeared and demanded to see his identification. When Marcus produced his papers, the officer claimed that there were technical problems with the communication system that affected only certain passengers. The excuse was so transparent that even nearby aliens seemed embarrassed by it. Dr. Carter witnessed this latest incident and finally decided to speak with Captain Crystal Thane about the situation. She made her way to the bridge and requested a private meeting with the captain. Her scientific credentials and reputation earned her an audience, though she could see that the captain was reluctant to discuss passenger security matters with her. Captain Crystal Thane listened to Dr. Carter's concerns about the treatment of Marcus, but he supported his security chief's decisions. The captain explained that passenger safety was his primary responsibility, and he could not ignore his security team's professional assessment. He assured Dr. Carter that the human was not being mistreated, merely monitored for everyone's protection. The afternoon brought a new development when Zextar discovered that Marcus had served in Earth's military forces. This information was not classified, but it had not been prominently displayed in his travel documents. The security chief felt vindicated in his suspicions. Clearly, this human was more dangerous than he had appeared. He immediately recommended to Captain Crystal Thane that Marcus be confined to quarters as a precautionary measure. Marcus spent the evening in his cabin, effectively under house arrest, though no formal charges had been filed against him. Room service brought his dinner, but the servers seemed nervous and hurried to leave quickly. He used the time to review his mission briefings and consider his options if the situation continued to deteriorate. The ship's rumor network spread, stories about the dangerous human throughout the passenger decks. Some tales claimed he was a spy, others suggested he was a terrorist planning to hijack the ship. The stories grew more elaborate with each telling, transforming Marcus from a simple passenger into a threatening figure of mystery and menace. Late that night, as the celestial dawn continued its journey through hyperspace, Marcus lay in his bed and listened to the subtle sounds of the ship around him. He had endured worse treatment during his military career, but the unfairness of the situation frustrated him. He was a decorated soldier traveling to serve the Federation, yet he was being treated like a criminal based on nothing but prejudice and suspicion. Skullrender's patience ran out as he watched the luxury ship's crew fumble through their failed negotiations. The pirate leader was a massive Kethmori, standing nearly 3 meters tall with thick gray skin covered in battle scars. His species was known for their physical strength and aggressive nature, traits that had served him well in his chosen profession. He had been raiding Federation shipping for over 20 years and had never encountered a vessel that could successfully resist his fleet. The boarding operation began with military precision that contrasted sharply with the chaos aboard the Celestial Dawn. 6 pirate shuttles launched from different ships in the fleet, each carrying a full squad of armed raiders. The pirates had conducted hundreds of similar operations and knew exactly how to overwhelm civilian crews before they could mount any effective resistance. Captain Crystal Thane watched helplessly as the first shuttle attached itself to his ship's main docking bay. His crew had no training for combat situations, and their security team was designed to handle drunk passengers, not armed pirates. Zexitar and his officers took defensive positions near the docking bay, but their weapons were light stunning devices meant for crowd control rather than real fighting. The first pirates through the airlock were Vorthak mercenaries armed with military-grade assault weapons. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had never encountered serious resistance from civilian crews. Zextar's security team managed to fire exactly 3 shots before being overwhelmed by superior firepower and training. The ship's head of security surrendered immediately when he realized his weapons could barely scratch the pirates' armor. Dr. Carter and the other passengers were herded into the main lounge by pirates who showed no interest in their comfort or safety. The raiders separated humans from other species, apparently following some predetermined plan for processing their captives. Several elderly passengers collapsed from stress and fear, but the pirates showed no sympathy for their condition. The ship's crew fared no better than the passengers. Captain Crystal Thane and his bridge officers were forced to their knees, while pirates took control of the ship's systems. The captain's crystalline form had turned completely gray, the Shardai, equivalent of total defeat and despair. His 20-year career commanding luxury vessels had not prepared him for this level of violence and chaos. Additional boarding parties secured the ship's engineering sections and cargo holds with similar efficiency. The pirates had obviously studied the Celestial Dawn's layout before the attack, allowing them to move quickly to all critical areas. Within 30 minutes of the first boarding shuttle's arrival, the entire ship was under pirate control. Skullrender himself boarded the ship through the main docking bay, accompanied by his personal guard of elite Kethmori warriors. The pirate leader's presence transformed the already terrifying situation into something even worse. His reputation for cruelty was legendary throughout the Outer Rim, and even hardened criminals feared falling into his hands. Marcus remained in his cell during the initial boarding operation, listening to the sounds of combat and surrender echoing through the ship's corridors. The brief firefight between the security team and the pirates told him everything he needed to know about the crew's capabilities. They had lasted less than 5 minutes against professional raiders, confirming his assessment that the ship had no real defensive capacity. The cell block's location in the lower decks meant that Marcus was among the last areas to be secured by the boarding parties. This gave him valuable time to observe the pirates' methods and identify their weaknesses. He noted the timing of their movements, the coordination between different boarding teams, and the apparent command structure of their operation. A young, human crew member named Jake Morrison had been working in the maintenance sections when the pirates boarded. The 23-year-old engineering assistant had managed to avoid capture by hiding in the ship's ventilation system. Jake was terrified and completely untrained for combat, but he was also the only crew member still free to take action. Jake had heard about Marcus's arrest over the ship's communication system and knew the approximate location of the detention facility. Desperation drove him to seek help from the imprisoned passenger, even though he had no idea what Marcus might be able to do in their situation. Jake crawled through maintenance shafts toward the lower decks, avoiding pirate patrols through luck rather than skill. The pirates began processing their captives according to standard procedures, developed over years of successful raids. Valuable Passengers were separated for ransom negotiations, while others were prepared for transport to slave markets. The raiders showed particular interest in passengers with technical skills or rare species characteristics that would bring high prices. From collectors, Skullrender toured his newest prize with the satisfaction of a professional who had achieved another successful operation. The Celestial Dawn would be worth millions of credits when sold to the right buyers, and the passengers would generate additional profits through slavery and ransom. He estimated the total value of this raid at over 50 million credits, making it one of his most profitable operations. Dr. Carter watched in horror as families were separated, and passengers were subjected to degrading medical examinations to determine their market value. The pirates showed no consideration for age, gender, or health status in their brutal efficiency. Several passengers begged for mercy, but the raiders ignored their pleas with the indifference of those who had seen it all before. The ship's communication systems were used to contact potential buyers for both the vessel and its human cargo. Skullrender's organization had established relationships with criminal networks throughout the galaxy, creating a ready market for their stolen goods. Messages went out to slave traders, shipbrokers, and ransom specialists advertising the latest haul. Marcus analyzed every sound reaching his cell as he constructed a mental map of the pirates' positions and activities. His military training had taught him to gather intelligence constantly, even in apparently hopeless situations. He identified at least 3 separate command voices, suggesting a well-organized force with clear chains of authority. Jake Morrison finally reached the detention level after an hour of crawling through cramped maintenance passages. The young man was exhausted, terrified, and completely out of his depth, but he had managed to avoid the pirate patrols through sheer luck. He located Marcus's cell and whispered through the door, asking if the prisoner was still there. The conversation between Marcus and Jake began cautiously, with both men uncertain about trusting the other. Jake explained the situation above and his desperate hope that Marcus might have some idea how to fight back against the pirates. Marcus listened carefully, asking specific questions about the raiders' numbers, equipment, and positioning. Skullrender concluded his inspection of the ship and prepared to transfer to his flagship. The actual process of selling the ship and its passengers would take several days, during which the Celestial Dawn would remain under guard by his fleet. He left detailed instructions with his lieutenants about maintaining security and preventing any rescue attempts. The pirate leader's departure marked the end of the initial boarding phase and the beginning of a longer occupation period. The raiders settled into routine patrols and guard duties, confident that their overwhelming superiority had eliminated any possibility of resistance. This overconfidence would prove to be their first mistake in an operation that had otherwise proceeded flawlessly. Jake Morrison pressed his face against the small window in the cell door, his eyes wide with desperation and fear. Marcus could see that the young man was barely holding himself together after witnessing the pirate takeover of his ship. The engineering assistant's hands shook as he fumbled with the cell door's control panel, trying to find some way to open the electronic lock. Marcus spoke calmly through the door, his voice carrying an authority that cut through Jake's panic. "Son, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. My name is Commander Marcus Johnson, United States Army Special Forces Delta Force. I'm traveling to Kepler Station to take command of the new Human Special Operations Division. But right now, none of that matters except for one thing. I know how to stop these pirates." The transformation in Marcus's voice and demeanor was immediate and striking. The quiet passenger who had endured 3 days of discrimination suddenly became someone entirely different. Jake could hear the confidence of a professional soldier, someone who had faced life and death situations many times before. The young man's panic began to subside as he realized he might have found someone who could actually help. Marcus continued speaking in measured tones that conveyed both urgency and control. "The cell door has an emergency release mechanism behind the panel on your left. It's designed to open during ship emergencies when the main power fails. You'll need to remove the cover and manually activate the release. Can you do that for me, Jake?" Jake's hands steadied as he followed Marcus's instructions. The cover came off easily, revealing a simple mechanical lever that bypassed the electronic lock. When he pulled the lever, the cell door slid open with a soft hiss. Marcus stepped out and immediately began moving with the purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. The corridor outside the detention area was empty, but Marcus could hear the distant sounds of pirate activity throughout the ship. He listened carefully for several seconds, identifying the locations of different groups and estimating their numbers. His years of experience in urban combat and hostage rescue situations had taught him to construct accurate mental maps from audio clues alone. Marcus turned to Jake and began issuing rapid but clear instructions. We need to reach the ship's emergency armory. Every Federation vessel is required to carry military-grade weapons for exactly this type of situation. The armory will be on Deck 5, Section 7, behind the Auxiliary Power Distribution Center. Do you know how to get there without using the main corridors? Jake nodded eagerly, his engineering background finally becoming useful. He knew every maintenance shaft and service tunnel on the ship, knowledge that had seemed unimportant until this moment. The two men began moving through the ship's hidden passages, with Jake leading the way and Marcus covering their rear. The journey to the armory took 20 minutes of careful movement through cramped spaces. Marcus demonstrated his military training by moving silently despite the confined quarters, while Jake's knowledge of the ship's layout allowed them to avoid several pirate patrols. They could hear voices and footsteps above them as the raiders went about their business unaware of the threat developing below. The emergency armory was exactly where Marcus had predicted, hidden behind reinforced doors that looked like ordinary storage compartments. Jake used his engineering access codes to open the outer door, revealing a small room filled with military equipment. Marcus's eyes lit up as he surveyed the weapons and gear available for their mission. Marcus selected his equipment with the efficiency of someone who had done this countless times before. He chose a Federation assault rifle, extra ammunition, flash grenades, and a tactical vest designed for human physiology. He also grabbed a communications headset that would allow him to coordinate with Jake during their operation. Jake watched in amazement as Marcus checked his weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Every movement was precise and purposeful, transforming the passenger he had known into a deadly professional soldier. The young man began to understand that he was witnessing someone who had spent years training for exactly this type of situation. Marcus outlined their strategy in simple terms that Jake could understand and follow. They would move through the ship systematically, using the pirates' own tactics against them. Small groups would be eliminated quietly, while larger groups would be confused and scattered through misdirection and psychological warfare. The goal was not just to fight the pirates, but to make them afraid. The first target was a two-man patrol moving through the lower decks near the engineering section. Marcus moved like a shadow through the ship's passages, appearing behind the pirates before they knew he was there. His combat knife eliminated both raiders in seconds, their bodies falling silently to the deck. Jake was shocked by the sudden violence, but Marcus's calm demeanor helped him stay focused. Marcus took the pirates' weapons and communication equipment, gaining valuable intelligence about their operations. He learned their radio frequencies, patrol schedules, and the locations of their command posts. This information would be crucial for planning his next moves against the remaining raiders throughout the ship. The second engagement occurred near the ship's main computer core, where 3 pirates were attempting to download passenger records and cargo manifests. Marcus used a flash grenade to disorient them before moving in with his rifle. The brief firefight ended with all 3 pirates dead and no damage to the ship's critical systems. Jake began to understand his role in the operation as Marcus explained how the ship's own systems could be used against the pirates. The young engineer could control lighting, artificial gravity, and atmospheric pressure from maintenance terminals throughout the vessel. These capabilities would become powerful weapons in the hands of someone who knew how to use them strategically. The psychological impact of Marcus's actions began to spread through the pirate force as patrol teams failed to report in on schedule. The raiders had expected easy duty guarding helpless passengers, not combat against a professional soldier. Fear and uncertainty began to replace their earlier confidence as they realized something was wrong. Marcus used the ship's internal communication system to monitor pirate radio traffic, listening to their growing confusion and concern. He could hear them reporting missing patrols and requesting backup for areas that had been considered secure. The pirates were beginning to realize that they faced an opponent unlike any they had encountered before. Dr. Carter noticed the change in their captor's behavior from her position in the main lounge. The pirates who had been relaxed and confident were now nervous and jumpy, checking corners and shadows constantly. Several passengers commented on the strange noises they had heard from other parts of the ship, sounds that might have been weapons fire. The pirate command staff aboard the Celestial Dawn received increasingly worried reports from their patrol teams. 3 separate squads had failed to check in, and radio contact with the lower deck teams had been lost completely. The lieutenant in charge of ship security began to suspect that they faced organized resistance rather than random technical problems. Marcus prepared for the next phase of his operation as he and Jake moved toward the ship's central areas where the largest concentrations of pirates were located. The easy targets had been eliminated, and now came the more dangerous work of engaging larger groups while protecting the innocent passengers caught in the crossfire. The transformation of Marcus from suspected terrorist to rescue force was complete. But the most difficult challenges still lay ahead. The pirates were now aware that they faced a serious threat, and they would respond with increased vigilance and firepower. Marcus knew that the real test of his abilities was just beginning. Marcus and Jake reached the ship's environmental control center without encountering any more pirate patrols. The raiders had pulled back their scattered forces and concentrated them in defensive positions around the passenger areas. This tactical change showed that the pirates were learning to respect their unknown opponent, but it also created new opportunities for Marcus to exploit. Jake's fingers flew over the environmental control systems as Marcus explained what he needed. The young engineer had never thought of the ship's life support systems as weapons, but Marcus's military mind saw possibilities everywhere. By controlling air pressure, lighting, and gravity in different sections, they could create confusion and fear among the pirates while giving themselves tactical advantages. The first demonstration of their new strategy occurred in Corridor 7, where a squad of 6 pirates had taken defensive positions. Marcus used Jake's control over the ship's systems to plunge the area into complete darkness, then gradually reduce the artificial gravity to 1/3 normal. The pirates found themselves floating helplessly in pitch-black corridors while Marcus moved among them with night vision equipment taken from the ship's emergency supplies. The psychological impact of fighting an invisible enemy in impossible conditions broke the pirates' morale instantly. 3 of them fled in panic, while the other 3 were eliminated by Marcus before they could adapt to the changed environment. The survivors spread word throughout the pirate force that they faced an opponent who could control the ship itself. Dr. Carter watched from the main lounge as strange things began happening throughout the vessel. Lights flickered in patterns that seemed almost like signals. Gravity fluctuated in ways that made some pirates stumble and fall, and the air circulation system created sounds that resembled whispers or footsteps. The passengers didn't understand what was happening, but they could see that their captors were becoming increasingly nervous. Marcus used the ship's communication system to monitor pirate radio traffic and coordinate his attacks with their patrol schedules. He learned that the raiders were calling for reinforcements from the other ships in their fleet, but Skullrender had refused to send additional forces. The pirate leader was confident that his existing troops could handle whatever resistance they faced aboard the luxury vessel. The next engagement took place near the ship's main computer core, where the pirates had established a command post to coordinate their operations. Marcus approached the area through maintenance shafts, emerging behind the pirates' defensive positions. He used smoke grenades to obscure their vision, then attacked from multiple directions by moving rapidly through the confusion he had created. Jake proved his value as a partner by using the ship's internal sensors to track pirate movements and provide Marcus with real-time intelligence about their positions. The young engineer's knowledge of the vessel's layout allowed him to guide Marcus through passages that the pirates didn't know existed, giving the Delta Force commander the element of surprise in every engagement. The pirates' attempts to adapt to Marcus's unconventional tactics only made their situation worse. When they tried to use their own night vision equipment, Jake overloaded the ship's lighting systems to create blinding flashes that rendered the devices useless. When they attempted to seal themselves into defensive positions, Marcus used maintenance access points to attack them from unexpected directions. Captain Crystal Thane and his bridge crew watched the security monitors in amazement as one human systematically dismantled a force that had overwhelmed their entire ship. The captain's crystalline form began showing hints of blue and green, the shard-eye colors of hope and admiration. For the first time since the pirates had arrived, he began to believe that survival might be possible. The turning point came when Marcus reached the passenger detention area, where Dr. Carter and the others were being held. 8 pirates guarded, the main lounge positioned to prevent any rescue attempt. Marcus studied their defenses carefully, noting their fields of fire and communication protocols. He knew that this engagement would be the most dangerous yet because of the risk to innocent civilians. Marcus coordinated his attack with precision timing that demonstrated years of hostage rescue experience. Jake shut down the gravity in the lounge area, just as Marcus triggered flash grenades from multiple directions. The pirates found themselves floating helplessly in blinding light, while Marcus moved among them with deadly efficiency. The rescue of the passengers lasted less than 2 minutes, but it transformed the entire situation aboard the ship. Dr. Carter and the other humans immediately recognized Marcus as their rescuer, while the alien passengers stared in amazement at the human, who had single-handedly defeated their captors. The psychological impact on both sides was enormous. Marcus quickly organized the freed passengers into groups and assigned them to safe areas throughout the ship. He gave specific instructions about staying away from certain corridors and sections, where fighting was still expected to occur. Dr. Carter volunteered to help coordinate the passenger groups, using her scientific training to remain calm under pressure. The remaining pirates aboard the Celestial Dawn found themselves trapped in an increasingly hostile environment. Their numbers had been reduced from 30 to fewer than 15, and they faced an enemy who seemed to know their every move before they made it. Radio communications with their fleet were becoming desperate pleas for rescue, rather than confident status reports. Jake had become proficient at using the ship's systems as weapons, creating earthquakes by manipulating artificial gravity, generating phantom sounds through the communication system, and controlling airflow to make some areas uncomfortable while others remained pleasant. The pirates began to feel that the ship itself had turned against them. Marcus pressed his advantage by escalating his psychological warfare tactics. He used the ship's speakers to broadcast the sounds of approaching Federation warships, even though he knew the real rescue fleet was still hours away. The pirates' morale crumbled further as they began to believe they were about to be caught between hostile forces. The pirate lieutenant commanding the boarding force made the fatal mistake of dividing his remaining troops to search for Marcus throughout the ship. This decision played directly into the Delta Force commander's strengths, allowing him to engage small groups individually rather than facing concentrated resistance. Each engagement further reduced the pirates' numbers while increasing their fear. Dr. Carter took charge of caring for passengers who had been injured during the initial boarding operation. Her medical training proved valuable as she treated shock, minor wounds, and the various ailments that affected different alien species under stress. The passengers began to see her as a natural leader among the humans aboard the ship. Marcus realized that the endgame was approaching as the surviving pirates pulled back to their final defensive position near the main docking bay. They were clearly preparing to evacuate back to their ships, but Marcus knew he couldn't allow them to escape. These raiders would simply attack other vessels if they were permitted to leave with knowledge of his tactics and capabilities. The stage was set for a final confrontation between Marcus and the remaining pirates, but unknown to everyone aboard the Celestial Dawn, this battle would soon attract the attention of someone far more dangerous than the ordinary raiders they had faced so far. Skull Render himself was about to enter the fight, and the pirate leader's reputation for violence and cunning had been earned through decades of successful battles against Federation forces. Skull Render's rage grew with each desperate radio transmission from his forces aboard the Celestial Dawn. The pirate leader had built his reputation on successful raids and overwhelming force, yet one human was systematically destroying his elite boarding party. The massive Kethmori warrior paced the bridge of his flagship, his gray skin darkening with fury as he listened to his lieutenant's increasingly panicked reports. The pirate fleet commander made a decision that would prove fatal. Instead of cutting his losses and abandoning the raid, Skullrender chose to board the luxury vessel personally with his best fighters. His pride could not accept defeat at the hands of a single human, especially when word of such a failure would spread throughout the criminal underworld and damage his fearsome reputation. Marcus monitored the pirate communications and learned of Skullrender's decision to join the battle. Jake listened nervously as the Delta Force commander explained what they were about to face. The pirate leader was not just another raider. He was a veteran warrior who had survived hundreds of battles and earned his position through cunning and brutality. The docking bay sensors detected the approach of Skullrender's personal shuttle, accompanied by 2 escort craft carrying his elite guard. Marcus knew this would be his most dangerous challenge yet. The remaining pirates aboard the ship would be reinforced by fresh troops led by an experienced commander who would not make the same mistakes as his subordinates. Marcus made rapid preparations for the final battle, positioning himself and Jake in strategic locations throughout the ship. He had already proven that conventional tactics would not work against him, so Skullrender would likely try something different. The pirate leader's reputation suggested he would rely on personal combat skills and overwhelming force rather than subtle strategy. Dr. Carter organized the rescued passengers in the safest areas of the ship, away from the docking bay where the final confrontation would occur. She could see the determination in Marcus's face as he prepared for battle, and she understood that everything depended on his ability to defeat an enemy who had terrorized the galaxy for decades. Skullrender's shuttle docked with brutal efficiency, and the pirate leader strode into the celestial dawn accompanied by 8 of his most trusted warriors. Each member of his guard had been personally selected for their combat skills and absolute loyalty. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons capable of cutting through starship hulls. The pirate leader's first decision showed his tactical intelligence. Instead of spreading his forces throughout the ship, Skullrender kept them together as a single unit that could support each other in combat. He had learned from the fate of his scattered boarding party and would not give the mysterious human defender any easy targets. Marcus realized immediately that his previous tactics would not work against this new threat. He could not pick off isolated soldiers or use environmental controls to confuse a concentrated force. This battle would require direct confrontation with an enemy who possessed superior numbers, equipment, and combat experience. Jake proved his worth by providing crucial intelligence about Skullrender's movements through the ship's internal sensors. The young engineer had become skilled at tracking multiple targets simultaneously and could warn Marcus about the pirate leader's position and intentions. This information would be vital for planning any successful attack. The first encounter between Marcus and Skullrender's forces occurred in the ship's main corridor system. The pirate leader had anticipated an ambush and prepared accordingly, using his warriors to scout ahead while he remained in a protected position. When Marcus attempted his usual hit-and-run tactics, he found himself facing concentrated firepower that forced him to retreat. Skullrender's voice echoed through the ship's communication system as he taunted his hidden opponent. The pirate leader had fought humans before and considered them inferior warriors despite their reputation for stubbornness. He offered Marcus a chance to surrender and face a quick death rather than the prolonged torture that awaited him when he was finally captured. Marcus ignored the psychological warfare and focused on finding weaknesses in Skullrender's approach. The pirate leader's decision to keep his forces concentrated provided protection against ambush, but it also limited their mobility and made them predictable. Marcus began planning an attack that would turn the pirates' strength into a weakness. The Delta Force commander's opportunity came when Skullrender's group approached the ship's central hub, where multiple corridors intersected around a large, open area. Marcus had prepared this location carefully, using Jake's technical skills to modify the environmental systems for maximum tactical advantage. The battle would be fought on Marcus's terms rather than the pirates'. Marcus waited until the entire pirate force entered the central hub before triggering his trap. Jake simultaneously activated gravity generators that created conflicting fields throughout the area, making normal movement impossible. Emergency bulkheads sealed the exits, trapping the pirates in a confined space where their numbers became a disadvantage. The battle that followed demonstrated why Marcus had earned his reputation as one of Earth's elite soldiers. He used the chaotic gravity fields to move in 3 dimensions while the pirates struggled to maintain their footing. His weapons fire came from impossible angles as he bounced between walls, ceiling, and floor with practiced skill. Skull renders. Warriors found themselves fighting an enemy who seemed to defy the laws of physics. Their heavy armor became a liability in the shifting gravity fields, while Marcus's lighter equipment allowed him to adapt quickly to the changing conditions. 3 pirates fell in the first minute of combat before they could adjust to the unusual environment. The pirate leader himself proved more adaptable than his followers. Skullrender used his natural strength and combat experience to partially overcome the environmental disadvantages, managing to return fire at Marcus despite the difficult conditions. The massive Kethmori warrior began working his way toward Marcus's position through sheer determination. Jake monitored the battle from his control station, adjusting the gravity fields to help Marcus while avoiding interference with his movements. The young engineer had become an expert at predicting his partner's tactical needs and providing support exactly when it was required. Their teamwork had evolved into an efficient combat partnership. The turning point came when Skullrender made a desperate charge toward Marcus's position, using his superior size and strength to power through the gravity distortions. The pirate leader's weapon blazed with energy as he closed the distance, forcing Marcus into the most dangerous close-quarters combat of his career. Marcus's Delta Force training had prepared him for exactly this type of encounter. He used Skullrender's momentum against him, redirecting the pirate leader's charge into a bulkhead while simultaneously targeting the weak points in his armor. The battle became a deadly dance of move and countermove between 2 expert warriors. The final moments of combat tested both fighters to their limits. Skullrender's experience and natural advantages were matched against Marcus's training and tactical intelligence. The outcome would determine not only the fate of everyone aboard the Celestial Dawn, but also whether humanity's reputation as a warrior species was deserved or merely based on propaganda. When the gravity fields finally stabilized and the emergency lighting revealed the results of the battle, only one figure remained standing in the central hub. The notorious pirate leader who had terrorized the galaxy for decades lay motionless beside his fallen warriors, defeated by a human they had dismissed as primitive and inferior. On the 3rd day of the journey, the ship's long-range sensors detected something that changed everything. Lieutenant Crix, a young Vorthak officer monitoring the sensor station, noticed unusual energy signatures approaching from the outer system. The readings suggested multiple ships moving at high speed toward their current position. He immediately called for his supervisor to verify the readings before reporting to the bridge. Chief Sensor Officer Veltar confirmed the worst fears when he analyzed the data more carefully. The approaching ships displayed the irregular energy, patterns typical of pirate vessels, jury-rigged engines, mismatched weapon systems, and the distinctive electromagnetic signatures of ships that had been stolen and modified. Even worse, there were 12 separate contacts, indicating a full raiding fleet rather than a single opportunistic pirate. Captain Crystal Thane received the report in his quarters while reviewing passenger complaints about the security situation. His crystalline form immediately shifted to deep red, the Shardai equivalent of extreme alarm. Pirate attacks on luxury vessels were rare in this sector, which was supposed to be well patrolled by Federation forces. The Celestial Dawn had minimal defensive capabilities, relying on its reputation and Federation protection rather than heavy weapons. The captain rushed to the bridge and ordered his crew to transmit an emergency signal to the nearest Federation patrol. Unfortunately, their escort vessels were still 2 days away, having been delayed by engine problems on one of the ships. The Celestial Dawn was essentially alone in space with a pirate fleet closing in on their position. Captain Crystal Thane's crystals flickered between red and yellow as he struggled to control his panic. Zextar arrived on the bridge within minutes of the alarm being raised. The security chief's first thought was not about defending the ship, but about the suspicious human passenger. In his mind, the timing of the pirate attack could not be a coincidence. Clearly, Marcus had somehow signaled these pirates to attack the ship. Zextar immediately recommended placing the human under formal arrest and interrogating him about his connections to the pirate fleet. The bridge crew worked frantically to assess their defensive options. The Celestial Dawn carried only light, defensive weapons designed more for show than actual combat. The ship's shields could withstand meteor impacts and minor collisions, but they were not built to stop military-grade weapons. Against 12 pirate ships, their chances of survival looked extremely poor. Dr. Carter was in the ship's laboratory when the emergency alarm began sounding throughout the vessel. She quickly made her way toward the passenger areas to see what was happening. The corridors filled with confused and frightened passengers as crew members tried to maintain order, while obviously struggling with their own fear. The sight of panicking aliens did nothing to calm the human passengers aboard. Marcus heard the alarm from his cabin and immediately recognized it as a general emergency signal. His military instincts took over as he began mentally preparing for various scenarios. He moved to his small window and scanned the space around the ship, looking for any visual signs of the approaching threat. The stars looked normal, but he knew that enemy ships might not be visible yet at this distance. On the bridge, Captain Crystal Thane attempted to contact the approaching vessels and determine their intentions. The response came in the form of a harsh voice speaking accented Federation standard. The speaker identified himself as Skullrender, leader of the Void Hunter Pirate Confederation. He demanded the immediate surrender of the Celestial Dawn and all passengers and crew aboard. The pirate leader's demands were simple and terrifying. All passengers would be taken as slaves to be sold in the Outer Rim markets. The ship's cargo and valuables would be seized, and the vessel itself would be added to the pirate fleet. Any resistance would result in the complete destruction of the ship and everyone aboard. Skullrender gave Captain Crystal Thane exactly 10 minutes to decide. Zextar used the crisis to justify his suspicions about Marcus. He convinced Captain Crystal Thane that the human must be working with the pirates, possibly as an inside contact who had provided information about the ship's schedule and defenses. The security chief requested permission to arrest Marcus immediately and use him as a bargaining chip in negotiations with the pirates. Captain Crystal Thane, desperate for any option that might save his ship and passengers, agreed to Zextar's plan. Security officers were dispatched to arrest Marcus on charges of conspiracy and collaboration with pirates. The captain hoped that turning over the suspected collaborator might satisfy the pirates enough to spare the rest of the passengers. Marcus was reading in his cabin when the security team arrived to arrest him. 4 Vorthak officers surrounded him with weapons drawn, clearly expecting resistance. Marcus remained calm and cooperative, allowing them to place restraints on his wrists without protest. He asked what charges were being filed against him, but the officers refused to provide any information. The walk to the ship's detention area gave Marcus a chance to observe the crew's panic and poor preparation for the crisis. Security officers ran through corridors without apparent coordination. Passengers milled about in confusion, and the few crew members he saw looked terrified. It was clear that the Celestial Dawn was not prepared for a military emergency of any kind. The ship's detention facility consisted of 3 small cells designed to hold disruptive passengers rather than serious criminals. Marcus was placed in the largest cell, which contained only a simple bench and basic sanitation facilities. The restraints were removed, but the cell door was sealed with an electronic lock that required security codes to open. Dr. Carter learned about Marcus's arrest from other passengers who had witnessed the security team's actions. She immediately went to the bridge to demand an explanation from Captain Crystal Thane. The captain informed her that the human was suspected of working with the pirates and that his arrest was necessary for ship security. Dr. Carter protested that the charges were ridiculous, but her arguments fell on deaf ears. The pirate fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly 10 minutes after their ultimatum expired. 12 mismatched ships of various sizes and configurations surrounded the Celestial Dawn, their weapons trained on the luxury vessel. The pirates had clearly done this before, positioning themselves to prevent any escape attempt while maintaining firing solutions on all critical ship systems. Skullrender's flagship, a heavily modified battlecruiser called the Blood Fang, took position directly in front of the Celestial Dawn's bridge. The pirate ship's hull bore the scars of countless battles with weapon emplacements jutting out at irregular angles. Gun ports opened along its sides, revealing enough firepower to destroy the passenger ship several times over. Captain Crystal Thane opened communication with the pirate leader and attempted to negotiate. He offered to turn over the suspected collaborator as proof of his cooperation, hoping this gesture might earn some mercy for his passengers and crew. Skullrender laughed at the offer, explaining that he had no need for informants when his intelligence network had already provided all necessary information about the ship. The pirate leader rejected any attempt at negotiation and demanded immediate and unconditional surrender. Boarding parties were already preparing to transfer to the Celestial Dawn, and resistance would only delay the inevitable while increasing casualties. Captain Crystal Thane realized that his attempt to blame Marcus had failed completely, leaving him with no options for saving his ship. In his cell, Marcus listened to the communications between the bridge and the pirates through the ship's internal speakers. He quickly assessed the tactical situation and began formulating potential response plans. His military training had covered hostage scenarios extensively, and he recognized several opportunities that the ship's crew was missing in their panic and inexperience.